Welcome to Truth Seekers Northeast. We're going to discuss flat Earth today with John Hamer. So if you're not a flat earther now, you might be by the end of today. I don't know what you want. So,
well, I've got something to say about that, but anyway, go on.
Never mind. Yeah. Questions at the end, John?
Yeah, questions at the end, please.
Questions at the end?
Is that a hint, is it?
Yeah, that's a hint. Especially for you. Especially for you. The two troublemakers at the Especially for you.
Like a Sarah bookend.
So keep your phones on silent or off and we'll have a good day. Right? Okay, leave it to you, John.
Thank you. Is everybody settled?
Everybody's settled.
Right, okay. Except for Dawn.
Not my fault.
Yes, it is.
It is. I'm blaming you anyway. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thanks again to Maureen for inviting me. I can see there's some slightly different faces to last night, so I will cover exactly what I did at the beginning last night, but just for the benefit of anyone who's never seen me speak before, and I don't know if there is anybody who's never seen me speak before. My name's John Hamer, obviously. I'm a geopolitical researcher, author and speaker, and I have been for the last 4 years. Yeah, as Maureen said, what we're going to talk about, I actually correct her a little bit, although it is kind of flat Earth. It's more, I don't describe myself as a flat earther. I'm a globe Earth denier. Okay? I don't know what shape it is. I don't care what shape it is. Not in the least. So I have absolutely no axe to grind. All I'm interested in, as with every other subject I talk about and write about, is the truth. That's all I concern myself with. And I present to you the truth as I see it. I'm not saying I'm right all the time. I'm certainly not wrong all the time, but I'm certainly not right 100% of the time. But this is just my opinion, my take, the result of the years of research that I do. But before I launch into it, I'd just like to get a little show of hands as to who believes that the Earth is a globe. Don't be frightened. Yeah,
No,
okay.
not necessarily globe,
Yeah,
tops and shaped.
Okay, alright. No, that's fine, absolutely. Well, hopefully I can, maybe not change your minds, but at least I can make you think along a different direction. I did intend to put a PowerPoint presentation together for this, because there are some very interesting pictures that I could show you, but unfortunately I have been so busy for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I just literally didn't have time.
Not really an excuse though, is it, John?
It was until you said it.
I'm really sorry, I am mortified. But so I'm going to do what I did last night, and that is I'm just going to read the notes from my book, basically, because all this stuff is in here. Right, okay, so I know it's a very emotive and contentious subject, even amongst established truthers, but something that really puzzles me, and this is what kind of led me down this road to begin with, is that if the Earth is a globe, and that is the absolute truth, why is it that YouTube delete anything that is pro-flat Earth? Why do they do that? Because they delete every other bit of the truth. So why would they leave that? Why would they not leave that on if it's absolute nonsense? Okay, you know, so yeah, that's a rhetorical question, obviously. But if anybody wants to give me an answer to that, I'm quite willing to listen to it afterwards. Okay, so I mean, I've said this to Maureen and Dawn, so they know this, but and Pete. But I was due to speak at a conference in Staffordshire in the summer, but unfortunately I was ill, and well, Charlie knows that as well, because when we met in July I was a little bit bad, but it got worse and I was out of action for 5 weeks, so I missed the conference. Anyway, that's by the by. But I was supposed to be speaking at this conference, and another member of the Truth movement, a so-called truther, decided that he wouldn't appear on the same platform as me because I was talking about flat Earth. And I mean, my view on that is, well, you know, if somebody's a truther, are we not meant to take in every bit of information that we can and then make a decision based on that, and not just dismiss stuff out of hand and refer to people like myself as shills or whatever, just because I am trying to speak the truth? I'm not 100% convinced what the Earth is, you know, but as I said earlier, I just go where the truth takes me. And so, you know, you can take that or leave it. But I come at it from a slightly different angle to most people who talk about flat Earth. Because the way I look at it, I look at the bigger picture, as I always do. Anybody who knows my work knows that I always look at the massive, big picture. And where does this particular thing fit into the bigger picture? You know, don't just take it in isolation. There is a big picture out there, and this, I believe, is absolutely part of it. I think it's actually part of a triple attack on us by the powers that be, along with two other elements, and that is evolution and the Big Bang Theory. Why do I say this? Well, I believe that these three things taken together, that is the globe Earth, the Big Bang Theory and evolution, together prop up a wholly satanic idea that we are as a species just an infinitesimal speck of nothingness in a vast unending universe. Okay, and this is what they want us to believe. Because they want us to believe we're in total irrelevance, an accident, a cosmic accident, and not the powerful spiritual beings that we actually are. That thought to them is so dangerous, and this is why I believe in the non-globe Earth theory, if you like. Okay, so it's just simply a way to keep us subdued in a tiny little box of reality, a fake reality of their construction, and thereby render us powerless. Because, as you all know, there are 7 billion of us. There's only a few thousand of them. This is just one of the ways that they attack us and keep us subdued. So, to clarify it, again, I don't want to labour the point too much, but by making it appear that some vast universe appeared as part of a large cosmic accident, and that we're just one of trillions of other planets throughout this universe, and also that we evolved accidentally from pond slime, well, that makes us just about as insignificant as we could possibly be. Okay, and it really is psychological programming. But acknowledging the Earth is flat, that the Big Bang Theory is nonsense, and that evolution is just one huge myth, is to acknowledge that we are the centre of creation, okay, which I believe to be the case, as all the ancients firmly believed, and that we were created by an intelligent designer. But of course we can't have that, can we? Because that doesn't fit their agenda at all. They want us to live in a fake reality that they've designed for us. So anyway, now we've got that out of the way, let's begin on the actual stuff regarding globe Earth versus flat Earth. A cat-loving friend once said to me, not Maureen by the way, I know she's a cat lover, but a cat-loving friend once said to me, and this is a quote, "The Earth cannot possibly be flat," she said. "If it were..."
Oh, that's true.
Can I carry on? Is that okay? She said, and I quote, "The Earth cannot possibly be flat. If it were, then cats would have already knocked everything off the edge." Yeah, so that's possibly the strongest argument I've ever heard for the globe Earth, to be honest. Seriously though, you know, there's been a vast quantity of literature, videos and debate on the internet about this topic, and it's a very, as I say, it's a very hot topic, it's a very contentious topic. You know, this has been, the globe Earth has only been around for 500 years, believe it or not. Okay, up until that point in time, and that just by sheer coincidence, I'm absolutely sure, this is actually when Freemasonry started to come to the fore, and things like the Royal Society got involved and all that sort of stuff. That was the flat Earth was a general norm for right up until that period. So, what actually is the flat Earth theory? Okay, the flat Earth theory is, and again, I must stress that I don't necessarily subscribe to flat Earth. I just don't know what it is, but I do know that it's definitely not a globe. Okay. According to the flat Earth theory, the Earth is a huge disk, okay, a flat disk, surrounded with the Arctic Circle in the centre, surrounded by Antarctica, which goes all around the rim. So imagine like a big saucer, a big dish, and there's a 150 to 200 foot ice wall all around the edge, and that's how they describe the fact that you can't fall off the edge and that it keeps all the water in place. So this theory also states that this flat disk with the ice around the edge is covered by a huge dome, okay? Which does make some kind of sense. I'm not 100% convinced, but it does make some kind of sense. Because when you think about it, this globe Earth model that we're told about, how does the, and this has puzzled me from being a child, how does the atmosphere not boil off into space or just dissipate into space? What holds that atmosphere in? You know, we're told that outer space, this vast unimaginable tract of nothingness, is a vacuum. So I was also taught in my physics lessons at school, some of you may have been, that nature abhors a vacuum. Nature doesn't like vacuums, and it tries to fill them wherever it's possible by spreading out into the vacuum and filling it up. So why does Earth's atmosphere not just dissipate into outer space? What's stopping it? I've never heard a convincing argument to tell me why that would be yet. Okay, and yeah, so I would like to say to Professor Brian Cox and his ilk, answer that one if you can, Brian. You know, I really think this guy should have stuck to being an extremely mediocre keyboard player in a teeny bopper band, because that's about his limit, to be honest.
Wouldn't they say gravity?
Pardon?
Gravity. Wouldn't they say that?
That's the excuse.
That's the
Gravity.
excuse, I'll come on to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gravity can't hold a gas though.
We're going to get to that, lad, John.
We'll get to it.
Shut up with the cheap stores.
That's how it's not us entering.
Yeah. So, again, in the flat Earth model, day and night are explained by the sun and moon being spheres measuring 51 kilometres in diameter, and there is a lot of evidence for that, and moving in a circular motion above the flat plane. And like spotlights, they're both, one in the day, one at night, illuminate different parts of the planet at different times in a continuous cycle of 24 hours. And again, there are lots of videos on other platforms than YouTube, because YouTube won't allow that sort of stuff, that show exactly how that paradigm works, if you like. So as I say, I don't like to think of myself as a flat earther as such. I'm just a globe Earth debunker, basically. Because, well, at the very least, flat Earth theory highlights many issues with the globe Earth hypothesis as it's presented to us. And it's certain to us that we've been lied to about this subject on a massive scale for centuries. But what the real shape of the Earth is, it's still an unexplained mystery as far as I'm concerned, and it's certainly worth asking questions about at the very least. But you know, whatever the shape of the Earth is, there's no question about it. We're definitely being lied to on a huge scale. So it's the Royal Society who controls science and controls the knowledge that science disseminates to us, and Freemasonry, and they hold a very far-reaching grip on the currently accessible knowledge that we have about what's true and what's false. Again, I'm sure a lot of you know that. So, can it be a mere coincidence that people such as Copernicus, Galileo and Newton, who were some of the most important architects of the currently accepted paradigm, were all fully paid up members of the Masonic fraternity? Just think about that. And is it just a coincidence that the Earth was generally accepted as being both flat and the centre of the universe, right up until the point of time 500 years ago that Nicholas Copernicus devised his solar-centric model of the solar system, which was accompanied at the time by the scorn and indeed rage from the incumbent Catholic religion at that time, and its millions of adherents, obviously. I mean, even the ancient Greeks, they, you know, these people weren't stupid. They possessed many gifted, far ahead of their time, mathematics, scientists, astronomers, such as Euclid, Plato, Archimedes, Socrates. They all believed that the Earth was flat. Again, these people weren't stupid. They knew what day it was. But flat earthers generally, or non-globe earthers, whatever you want to call us, believe that we've been taught a lie so huge and diabolical all our lives that it's blinded us from the evidence that sits right in front of our eyes. And I'm going to come on to talk about some of the evidence of our own eyes and the common sense and this has prevented us from seeing the world as it really is. Okay. Now, through pseudo-scientific books and TV programmes, documentaries, mass media, public education, university and government propaganda, the world, I believe, has been systematically brainwashed and slowly indoctrinated over centuries into the belief of what's possibly the greatest lie ever told. And that's up against some pretty stiff competition. You know, but again, what exactly is flat Earth theory? Actually, there's never actually been anything that's been named a flat Earth theory. Different cultures throughout different time periods, have believed a massively diverse array of worldviews which can't easily be summed up with the phrase flat Earth. And nor is the idea of flat Earth something that is exclusive to the Western world either. A lot of ancient cultures believed it. You could argue that these people were ignorant savages. I would concede that that's probably the case in some cases, but not in all, far from it. You know, I talked about Greeks for a start. Okay, but even the most rudimentary historical research reveals that the idea that the Earth is flat has been a notion shared by an extraordinarily wide range of cultures and tied to vastly different systems and cosmologies, presumably for obvious reasons. So, be honest with yourselves, who among us, this is a really key issue, would have guessed that the Earth was actually a sphere had we not been told this over and over and over again and been shown countless videos, most of which are CGI by the way, and presented with copious amounts of evidence, in inverted commas, to back up that premise. Who the hell, sorry?
Graphics.
CGI.
Oh, sorry, computer generated images.
Thank you.
Sorry. So, so there's certainly no apparent evidence for we mere mortals to believe in such a wild and crazy notion that the Earth is in fact a spinning ball in space. And if the globe earthers could, or ever had, proved beyond absolute doubt that the Earth is a globe, there'd be no flat Earth movement in existence to tell us otherwise. You know, you need to think about that as well, anybody who's got any doubts about that. As I say, it was a common belief in ancient Greece, as well as in India, China, and a wide range of other cultures as well. And both the poets Homer and Hesiod described a flat Earth, and this view was also maintained by Thales, considered by many one of the first philosophers, Lucretius, an avowed materialist in other aspects, and as well as Democritus, who was the founder of atomic theory. Okay, they all believed in a flat Earth, for good reason. So, yeah, as I say, lots and lots of different cultures believed in the Earth being flat, and with good reason. But the key question for me is, simply because we know for certain there is so much of our alleged knowledge that is falsified, we know this, don't we? I mean, we wouldn't be here sat in this room if we didn't think this, for political and financial expediency. Could this also mean that the spherical Earth is also a false premise for reasons similar to the Big Bang and evolutionary theories? So let's examine it more closely now. I'll move on to some aspects of why the globe Earth model, to me, seems false. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play devil's advocate against the spherical Earth model and in favour of flat Earth. Okay. So, firstly, why would they lie? I mean, you know, when I'm doing research, I always ask the question, why? You know, why would this be? Why would that be? So why would they lie about the shape of the Earth in the first place? I mean, it's quite a large lie, you have to admit. So there must be a very good reason. So, but I believe the answer is quite simple, really. Besides the scenario described at the beginning, of it being to keep us in our tiny little box of fake reality, the most obvious reasons for such a massive lie are our old friends, money and world control. Again, where have we heard this before? NASA, our old friends at NASA, stands for never a straight answer, as some of you probably know. Takes tens of billions of dollars from US taxpayers per day, from US taxpayers for starters. But where is all that money going? If indeed it's all fakery, everything that they produce is fake, basically. So where's it all going? I mean, it certainly requires extremely large sums of money to, for example, fake a space station in a huge swimming pool, which is what they do, and pay technicians to create thousands of CGI videos of their globe Earth, as well as keep them all quiet about it, obviously. But of course, this is nowhere near as much as it would cost to perpetrate the real thing. And so several people, several groups of people, must be getting very, very rich on the back of all this. Now, interestingly, I don't know how many of you are aware of the origins of NASA, where it all came from. It was started in the 1950s by prominent members of the occult, basically. So it's a very occultist organisation, NASA. All top-level astronauts are Freemasons, every single one without exception. They've sworn an oath of secrecy upon pain of horrific death. And we talked a little bit last night, for those of you who are here, about the Jack the Ripper story and the Freemasonic ritual, what happens to you if you go against them. And the Satanic Kabbalah is openly taught at NASA, which is interesting. Now, is anybody aware of the five founding members of NASA were?
Do you have any sign as well?
Jack Parsons, yeah, one.
Von Braun?
Von Braun, two. I think the next three might surprise you.
Walt Disney?
Walt Disney, good one.
Extra point for Chris.
Yeah.
Scientology?
Ron Hubbard.
Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, and Aleister Crowley.
Oh, right, really, those five, right?
Those five people are the founders of NASA. So what does that tell us? I mean, come on, let's be reasonable about this. Okay. So, you know, I would encourage anybody, as I always do, you know, I'm not saying that I'm telling the absolute truth. I'm only telling the truth as I understand it. But I would encourage anyone to do their own research on this stuff. And, you know, not just on this, but with anything else that I tell you, or that you read in my books, you know. Clearly, obviously, these people are not promoting true science, are they? I mean, it's just a pagan religious thing and a very, very sinister agenda. Now, as many people are now becoming aware with all this absolute nonsense that's going on, the satanic elite, they've got this huge plan to create a communist, totalitarian, one-world government, otherwise known as the New World Order, or NWO for short. I mean, we're seeing it happening right in front of our eyes at the moment, or they're trying their damnedest to do it. They're not going to succeed, by the way, but they're trying their damnedest. And one of the key goals in this plan is to commandeer science, as well as history. You know, my two books on those topics, the falsification of history and the falsification of science, lay it out in no uncertain terms. But the other key thing that you have to bear in mind, as we see in our everyday lives, is that one of the goals to achieve that is to completely brainwash and propagandize the entire population into believing things that aren't true, which will allow them a free rein in fulfilling that agenda. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, one of those goals is to convince the general population that we evolved from nothing more than pond slime in the primordial soup, through fish and small mammals to monkeys and apes, and that everything now in existence was created from nothing in the utterly ridiculous concept known as the Big Bang. Now, I'm not going to go into Big Bang and evolution, but again, that's all in, it's been both falsification of history and an updated version of it in falsification of science. So I'm not going to cover those, but that's just a by the by. Now, here's an interesting quote from a guy called William Casey, who was director of the CIA during the Reagan administration, and he said, quite openly, because again, they love to put all this stuff, hide it in plain sight. William Casey said, and I quote, "We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false."
Nice.
What does that tell us? You know? So, the flat Earth model, it's a stationary Earth set on a firm foundation of some unknown composition, with a local sun and moon set in the firmament or inside the dome. The stars are above the firmament. The universe is relatively small and close, and the Earth is not hurtling through a vast expanding Big Bang universe. It's actually the centre point of all creation. Okay. The theories of evolution, just to labour this point again, the Big Bang theory, atheism, the New Age movement, the New World Order and the occult are all based on the ball Earth, the globe Earth premise. And the spinning globe Earth hurtling around a giant sun is nothing more than pagan sun worship. And this is the foundation for all the satanic beliefs. Without the globe Earth, all these theories, aka lies, fall apart and have no foundation at all. So using the flat Earth model as a basis, evolution and the Big Bang simply do not compute at all. They just don't fit into that paradigm at all. A flat stationary Earth inside a dome with a closed fixed universe of stars and wandering stars, i.e. planets, rotating around inside the dome, clearly points to intelligent design of some kind and completely negates all the above deceptions. But of course, these deceitful people that try to rule over us with a rod of iron absolutely hate the truth, and they do anything they possibly can to prevent us from finding out the truth. So of course they attack the flat Earth movement and use every trick known to man to prevent the truth being spread around, and ridicule it to the point that people will not even bother to research it because it just appears, the way they present it, as being sheer lunacy. But all it takes, and I'm living proof of this, is the smallest amount of cursory research and the truth becomes so obvious. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to come on now to some actual aspects of flat Earth that disprove the globe theory. Okay, so we'll talk about some specifics now. This is something that is actually propounded by mainstream science. This is not the flat Earth movement that say this. This is a general mainstream science thing. Okay, it's a fact that on a flat plane, from direct observation, the horizon, when you look out across a vast expanse of land and you can see the horizon, it always appears as a complete flat 360-degree circle to the observer, regardless of how high you may be. And also, the horizon always rises to your eye level. So wherever you are, if you're on the top of Mount Everest, if you're right at sea level, it doesn't make any difference. As you look at the horizon, it's always at your eye level. And if you observe it as you move upwards, say in a plane, for example, as the plane's taking off, the horizon is always at your eye level. Now, it's a scientific fact, an indisputable scientific fact, that on a ball, on a globe, the horizon, the higher you go, will fall away in front of you. Okay? So this is just the first point that I will make. Any curvature on photographs or videos that you see, or you think you see, usually from curved plane windows, or from GoPro cameras and fisheye lenses, which, by the way, NASA always uses as proof of globe Earth. The reality is that the horizon never curves, no matter how high up and no matter how far you can see. The horizon always appears.
Questions at the end, please.
Was relevant to the point.
No questions at the end. Just keep it in mind.
Sorry, it does disturb my train of thought. That's all.
It is.
Yeah. So I've lost.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The horizon never curves because the Earth is an endless circular plane. On a globe that, despite being allegedly almost 25,000 miles in circumference, there'd always be a plainly obvious, noticeable disappearance of objects the further away they are. And especially in looking at something like a building, for example, miles away, if you've got a clear view and you can see the buildings, or if you want to look at it through binoculars or a telescope. If we were on a globe, then obviously the horizon is falling away in the distance, then those buildings would appear to be leaning backwards like that. And do we ever see that effect? No, never. No matter how far you can see. And I'll come on to how far you can see in a little in a short while. Yeah, so the natural behaviour of water is to always what's called find and maintain its own level. Yeah. If the Earth's a giant spinning tilted sphere hurtling through space at these unimaginable speeds that they tell us, then truly flat, consistently level surfaces would not exist here, and instead there'd be a massive bulge of water in the oceans because of the curvature of the Earth. If the Earth's curved and spinning, the oceans of water would be finding their own level and flooding the land, basically. Some rivers would be flowing uphill, and there would be widespread chaos and flooding. What we would see and experience would be vastly different. But as the Earth is claimed by flat earthers to be an extended flat plane, the fundamental physical property of water and other fluids finding and remaining level is consistent with that experience, common sense, and even more significantly with physics. The water remains flat at all times because the Earth is flat. And if the Earth is a 25,000 mile circumference ball, as NASA and the entire scientific modern astronomical and educational establishments claim, spherical trigonometry, which is what we use for this, dictates that the surface of all standing water must curve downwards at a quite easily measurable, and again this is mainstream science, 8 inches per mile multiplied by the square root of the distance, and that's how they work out the curvature of the Earth. This means that along, for example, say a 6-mile channel of standing water, which is easily visible, that the Earth would dip 6 feet on either end because of the curvature. This is simple maths, by the way, and away from the central peak in the middle. Every time experiments have been conducted, standing water has been proven to be perfectly level. And I'll come on to some of those experiments in a little while. So again, the Sun is much closer than we've been told. It's within our atmosphere, and it can clearly be seen that it's not 93 million miles away. Simply by the Sun's rays emerging from a cloud, for example. Have you ever seen, you might be walking along or driving along, and there's a broken cloud in the sky, and you see the Sun. It's above the clouds, obviously, but you see the Sun's rays, and they're coming down at an angle like that. Yep. Through the clouds, right? Right? If the Sun was 93 million miles away, those rays would absolutely be in a straight line because of the distance involved. And by using simple mathematics, geometry, you can actually measure the angles of those rays and totally determine how far away the Sun is through using that geometry. So, yeah, the Sun can also be seen directly above clouds in some hot air balloon photos, creating a hot spot on the cloud beneath it. And this absolutely proves a close, smaller Sun. That would be impossible with a distant Sun. You couldn't possibly get a little hot spot on the cloud. It just makes no sense at all. And also, and again this is confirmed by many, many airline pilots, despite what you might have been told that pilots don't believe in a flat Earth, there are at least 50% of them do. Okay? And they tell us that if we're on a spinning globe, as an airplane travels along, it would constantly have to dip its noses every few minutes to compensate for the curvature of the Earth. Otherwise it would just fly off into space. You know, so, you know, all pilots learn to fly based solely, and I've seen the documentation for this, actually states in the documentation, flight manuals, everything, they always learn to fly based solely on a level flat Earth model. Also, if the Earth is spinning, think about this one as well, planes travelling westwards would reach their destinations much faster, relatively speaking, than planes travelling eastward, or if the Earth was stationary. Does that make sense? Since the Earth is spinning in the opposite direction, of course. If the atmosphere is spinning with the Earth, which they tell us, then planes flying westwards would have to fly faster than the Earth's spin, which by the way they tell us is 1,000 miles an hour, just to even reach their destination. In reality, of course, though, the Earth is not a globe, and planes just simply fly level and reach their destination easily because the Earth isn't moving. here's a rather, no, I won't include that. Okay, there was an experiment done which is known as Aries Failure, after the guy who tried to prove that the Earth was moving, a guy called, can't remember his first name, but his surname was Airy, A-I-R-Y, and he tried to prove that the stars are moving, but he actually, what he succeeded in doing, unwittingly, he didn't set out to prove this, but it kind of changed his mind. Aries Failure, this experimental failure, proved that the stars move relative to a stationary Earth and not the other way around. What he did, he filled the telescope with water to slow down the speed of light inside it, then calculating the tilt necessary to allow the starlight directly down the tube, he absolutely failed to prove the heliocentric theory, since the starlight was already arriving at the correct angle with no change necessary, and instead he proved the geocentric model correct. In other words, it proved that the Earth was stationary and not moving in any direction. And there were other experiments done, the Mickelson-Morley Experiment, the Sagnac Experiment. They attempted to measure the change in the speed of light due to the Earth's assumed motion, but after measuring in every possible different direction in various locations, they totally failed to detect any significant change whatsoever, thus proving that the Earth is stationary. Okay, and if gravity is really a force strong enough, and really think about this, if it's really a force strong enough to prevent the trillions and trillions of tons of water in the Earth's oceans, buildings, people and the atmosphere from flying off into space, off the spinning ball, then surely it's totally impossible for gravity to be simultaneously so weak as to prevent tiny birds, insects, balloons, even smoke to become airborne. The two things are just totally contradictory. It's strong enough to prevent all this water from escaping or falling off the globe, but it's not strong enough to stop us from moving, you know. If it was holding all this water so rigidly as they claim, then we wouldn't even be able to swim through it. It just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, gravity is a total myth anyway. Gravity was invented by Newton, it wasn't discovered by Newton. It's nothing more than relative density. Okay? It's quite a simple thing. They turn it into this incredible thing. Oh, gravity, and oh, well, we can't explain it, we don't know what it is, but it definitely exists. Bollocks. All it is relative density. Newton's apple fell from the tree because an apple is denser than air. End of story. If Newton's apple had fallen from the tree and landed in a pond, what would have happened? It would have floated because it's less dense than water. Simple. But they had to create gravity to perpetuate the globe Earth myth. The model doesn't work without gravity. In fact, the whole universe doesn't work without gravity. And yet they still feed us all this bullshit about, oh, well, we can't explain it, but we know that it's gravity that holds the entire universe together and blah, 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 blah. It's just utter bollocks. So everything on the flat Earth is naturally arranged by density and mass. For example, ships' captains navigate great distances at sea, but they never ever need to factor in the supposed curvature of the Earth. Ever. There are two navigation methods. One's called plain sailing and great circle sailing, and the other one. These are the most popular nautical navigation methods, and it uses plane trigonometry, not spherical trigonometry, making all mathematical calculations on the assumption that the Earth is perfectly flat. If the Earth was a sphere, such an assumption would lead to constant, massive inaccuracies in navigation, and that has actually proved to be the case from people who've tried to do it that way. But plain sailing has worked perfectly fine in both theory and practice for thousands of years, and plane trigonometry has time and time again proved more accurate than spherical trigonometry in determining distance across the oceans. So if the Earth is really a globe, then every line of latitude south of the equator, imagine the equator around the ball, every line of latitude below that will get progressively smaller and smaller the further south that you travel. But if it's an extended plane, imagine the flat disk, every line of latitude, the equator here, every line of latitude south of that, or what they call south, would be progressively larger. So it's the opposite effect. The fact is that many captains, sea captains, navigating south of the equator, assuming the globe theory, have found themselves drastically off course. The more so the further south travelled. And this, again, it's all more evidence that the fact is that the Earth is definitely not a globe. So in the flat Earth model, again, the North Pole is the immovable centre of the world in the middle of the disk, and the entire universe, and Polaris, the North Star, sits over the North Pole at the highest point in the heavens, and like a slowly rotating planetarium dome, all the celestial bodies revolve around Polaris. So what does that tell us about the universe? How on earth, if we're moving in so many different directions all at once? And by the way, they tell us that our solar system is moving through the universe at, get this, 666,000 miles an hour. Where have we heard this number before? Yeah? So, yeah, it's all just nonsense. Okay. So, as I say, in the flat Earth model, the South Pole doesn't exist. Antarctica is actually a gigantic ice wall extending around the entire circumference, holding in the oceans. And as strange as this may seem at first, to anyone who's not come across this idea before, it's nevertheless a little known fact that if you set a bearing due south from anywhere on Earth, just before the 78th degree southern latitude, you'll find yourself face to face with an enormous ice wall, okay, which towers 100 to 200 feet in the air, extending both to the east and west around the entire circumference of the Earth. And I'm just going to read a quote here from a gentleman by the name of General A.W. Greeley from his book Antarctica, or the Hypothetical Southern Continent. Okay. The ice barrier, so frequently referred to in accounts of the Antarctic regions, is the forefront of the enormous glacier covering or ice cap, which, accumulating in vast fields from the heavy snowfall and ultimately attaining hundreds if not thousands of feet in thickness, creeps from the continent of Antarctica into the polar sea. The ice barrier, as part of a parent ice cap, presents itself to the navigator who has boldness enough to approach this fearful front as a solid, perpendicular wall of marble-like ice ranging from 1,000 to 2,000 feet in thickness, from which 100 to 200 feet rises above, and from 800 to 1,800 feet sinks below the level of the sea. Okay, another quote from a guy by the name of Samuel Rowbotham. It's been demonstrated that the Earth is a plane, the surface centre of which is immediately beneath a star called Polaris, and the extremities of which are bounded by a vast region of ice and water and irregular masses of land. The whole terminates in fog and darkness where snow and driving hail, piercing sleet and boisterous winds, howling storms, madly mounting waves and clashing icebergs are most common. So Antarctica is not the tiny ice continent found on the underside of Freemasonry's globe. Quite the contrary, Antarctica literally surrounds us 360 degrees, it encircles every continent and acts as a barrier holding in the oceans. The most commonly asked questions and the greatest mysteries yet to be solved are: how far does the Antarctic ice extend outwards? Is there a limit? What lies beyond? Is it just snow and ice forever? Or is there actually a finite end to it all? And this is the question that no one knows the answer to. Well, some of them might know, but they aren't telling us. But thanks to UN treaties such as the Antarctic Treaty, international law and constant military surveillance, both the North Pole and Antarctica remain cloaked in government secrecy. You know, this is a fact, this is not me making it up. And both are strictly designed no-fly, no-sail zones. There's been several reports of civilian pilots and ship's captains straying accidentally too close to either Antarctica or the Arctic and being warned away and escorted away under threats of extreme violence. And this is just me speaking now, but as a small aside, I did wonder if, you know, Scott of the Antarctica, I'm sure we all know that story because it's just been, you know, again, it's something that's been with us from childhood, isn't it? Just like the Titanic myths. I wondered if Scott of the Antarctica, in his famous unsuccessful quest to be the first human to reach the South Pole in 1912, is just an invented fantasy to help convince us that the South Pole is real. If so, it certainly wouldn't be the first nor the last alleged significant historical event to have been totally or partially fabricated. Were Scott and his entire expedition quietly exterminated by the elite powers before they could actually reach the Antarctic and discover the real truth about that mysterious continent? Or, the alternative is maybe that expedition did take place and Scott discovered some rather uncomfortable, not to mention inconvenient truths, for the establishment that is, and subsequently had to be disposed of in some way. Is it at all significant, maybe, that not a single member of that ill-fated expedition actually survived, but yet we're told conveniently they did actually reach the South Pole, but perished only 12 miles from safety on their return alleged 1900-mile round-trip hike across the Antarctic. So instead, again as with Titanic, we're left with this highly romanticised and enduring tale of bad luck and disaster that's created an indelible impact on the psyches of all of those who see it and hear it, with those existing myths embellished and enhanced by lots of documentaries, Hollywood blockbusters such as Scott of the Antarctic, and innumerable, as I say, documentaries perpetuating this story. Interestingly enough, the Scott of the Antarctic incident was actually 2 weeks before the Titanic sank as well. So just a coincidence, maybe, I don't know. So before reaching the Antarctic ice wall, in navigating the increasingly tumultuous southern oceans, explorers encounter the longest, darkest, coldest nights and the most dangerous seas and storms anywhere on Earth. Vasco da Gama, a 16th century Portuguese explorer, wrote that, and I quote, "The waves rise like mountains in height. Ships are heaved up to the clouds and apparently precipitated by circling whirlpools to the bed of the ocean. The winds are piercing cold and so boisterous that the pilot's voice can seldom be heard, whilst a dismal and almost continual darkness adds greatly to the danger." And in 1773, Captain James Cook became the first modern adventurer known to have breached the Antarctic Circle and reached the ice barrier. During 3 separate voyages, lasting 3 years and 8 days, Cook and his crew sailed a total of 60,000 miles along the Antarctic coastline. Let that sink in. 60,000 miles, never once finding an inlet or a path through or beyond the massive glacial wall. And in October 1839, another explorer, James Clark Ross, began a series of Antarctic voyages, lasting a total of 4 years and 5 months. Ross and his crew sailed 2 heavily armoured warships, thousands of miles, losing many men, looking for an entry point beyond the southern glacial wall, and again, they never found one. Yeah. And during Ross's voyages around the Antarctic circumference, he often wrote in his journal as to how perplexed they all were upon routinely finding themselves out of sync with their charts, stating that they found themselves an average of 12 to 16 miles adrift of what their calculations had predicted using the Globe Earth model. Every day, this is, by the way, with some days as much as 30 miles. Yeah, so the equatorial circumference of the globe Earth is said to be 24,900 miles, just short of 25,000 obviously, or 21,600 nautical miles. Now a nautical mile is the distance following the supposed curvature of the Earth from 1 minute of latitude to the next. A statute mile is the straight line distance between the two not taking into account the Earth's curvature, or alleged curvature. Now, calculations of distance made from the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa to Melbourne, Australia, at an average latitude of 35 degrees south, have given an approximate figure of over 25,000 miles. That's from South Africa to Australia, 25,000 miles. Now that fits in absolutely with the flat Earth model. I mean, that is greater than the Earth's supposed circumference in total at the equator. And calculations from Sydney, Australia to Wellington, New Zealand, at an average of 37 degrees south, have given an approximate distance of 25,500 miles, which is greater still. According to the ball Earth theory, the circumference of the Earth at 37 degrees latitude should only be 19,750 statute miles, almost 6,000 miles less than such practical measurements tell us. And we're just going to take a break there now for a few minutes.
Yep.
Because we're halfway through.
Thank you. Right, is everybody back in? Where's Sheila? Oh, right. Everybody back in the room. Time for part 2. And we're going to have Dave sing a song. What's the song called, Dave?
It's called the Global Conspiracy.
Do you want to move over here a bit? John, can I move you? So
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So he can be centre stage. And you're going to have Bill and I have to stand there.
Yeah, he's steady on that.
I do apologise because
If you need us to hold the words for you. Like Fifi.
I'll try.
This is the sole point.
I just had to knock some chords up on this very briefly because it's a song I wrote and I put it on a flash drive. And I was supposed to sing it, but the music is a backing track, so I've had to like
improvise.
Do you want us to hum along? Like?
So
yeah, well, I suggested
Is that the song
so
where you
this will
writ?
be a complete ball.
well, why don't we just all clap along?
NASA tells me that I live on a pole, spinning so fast, how come I don't fall? Revolving 1,000 miles an hour, no such force could our body allow. How come I can't find photos of Earth? All CGI or even much worse. They're all just fake, don't you know that it's true? Pseudoscience is fooling me. I don't believe in no gravity. Opposing forces create polarity. I wanna talk about the firmament, why it's up there, what its intent. It's in the Bible and it tells us so. People knew about it long ago. Just tell me straight, don't spin me no lie. Why astronauts can't be the sky. So in conclusion, I just wanna say, go on and research without delay. You'll be surprised by just what you find. One big conspiracy to keep me blind. It's all illusion just to keep you down here. Look up your mind, it's all about fear. I just had to knock those chords up quickly, is it?
But hang on, Dave. What about 2 jobs to a shot?
That's a completely different.
Well, I wrote this one, didn't I? I wrote this one.
Well,
I
that's
wrote the
John. Can do
tagline.
that. Yeah, not for the.
You want to do it at there?
Yeah, not for John.
All right.
2 jobs, no shot.
I don't want to throw that. That's a complete curveball. That.
Back to John.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were doing this bit, Maureen.
Oh, right, your notes.
Right. Oh, get back on my perch.
Get back up there. Right. Part 2.
Part 2, here we go. All the ruffle stuff on top. Right, I'm going to talk about some more specifics now, so I think you'll find this bit interesting. Hopefully you found the first bit interesting, but I think you'll find this bit interesting. Okay, I want to talk about, first of all, about airplane flights in the southern hemisphere. Okay? There are lots of strange anomalies about airplane flights in the southern hemisphere, which provide even more circumstantial evidence, if not hard proof, that the Earth is flat and not a globe. Okay. Just one simple example from many. Let's take at random a flight from Santiago in Chile on the west coast of South America to Christchurch, New Zealand. Right. I find it particularly strange that not one single airline, and this is true of other destinations in the southern hemisphere as well, provides a direct straight line flight, which is a distance of approximately 6,000 miles on a globe, or approximately the same distance as from London to Los Angeles. Instead, they all follow a very strange, convoluted route, if you assume it's a globe Earth. Okay. Now the route taken goes almost due north, up towards the east coast of the USA, okay, before turning due west across the west coast near Los Angeles, then taking a southwesterly track back across the Pacific Ocean to Sydney, Australia, before turning back southeasterly to Christchurch, New Zealand, which is a journey of 15,000 miles, when logically it should be only one of 6,000 miles. Doesn't make any sense, that, does it? Well, it doesn't to me anyway. But if you look at exactly that same journey on a flat Earth map, and unfortunately this is why I'm sad that I couldn't get the PowerPoint presentation done in time. If you look at that exact same journey on a flat Earth map, this is much more of a straight line route on the flat Earth. Apart from the small anomaly of Sydney to Christchurch, which can probably be excused for economic reasons, because Sydney's a far more popular destination than Christchurch. So it does make a little bit of sense that that Sydney should be a regular stop on that journey. That's fair enough. Okay, but that's just one. Okay, there are dozens of these, and there's also evidence to say that in the southern hemisphere, pilots, Freudian slip. Pilots are encouraged to turn off their transponder just before they land, or when they reach about 50 miles within their destination. Okay, so that's another story, but I won't go into that. So here are some more examples of some very strange airline routes from and to southern hemisphere destinations. Johannesburg, South Africa to Sao Paulo, Brazil. This flight goes via London. On a flat Earth map, it's a straight line. Right. Santiago, Chile to Johannesburg, South Africa. Refuels in Senegal in northern Africa. And these are just a few examples. If you look yourself at this stuff, you'll see there are dozens and dozens of them. Okay, it's just a very small selection. And again, all those routes make absolutely perfect sense on the flat Earth map. Some research of your own will prove to be very enlightening. So now let's move on to solar eclipses, which again is a very interesting one. The official explanation from NASA of a solar eclipse is that the moon passes directly between the sun and the earth, thereby blocking out the sun's light and creates a total solar eclipse for those directly in the path of the shadow. However, there are several problems with this explanation. Actually, before I go on to that, let me just say that has anybody never found it strange that they tell us that that the sun is exactly 400 times larger than the moon and is exactly 400 times further away than the moon, and this fact alone is what makes solar eclipses possible. How the chances of that, somebody worked that out, and it's absolutely unimaginably trillions upon trillions upon trillions to one that could possibly be the case. When in actual fact the sun and moon are both exactly the same size. And they appear to be as well in the sky when we look at them. But anyway, that's a slight digression. So there are several problems with that explanation about the solar eclipses. The main problem with the globe Earth model is that solar eclipses sometimes approach from the west, which again makes no sense at all. We're told that the moon rotates around the Earth from east to west, just as does the sun. But in this instance, the moon, during a westerly approaching solar eclipse, is obviously eclipsing the sun from the west. So how does that actually work on a globe Earth model? It just doesn't make sense. And again, I wish I'd got a presentation I could show you exactly what I mean, because saying it and actually seeing it in action, if you saw it on a PowerPoint presentation, you would get what I mean. But you just have to take my word for it. It is just utter nonsense, and it just doesn't work at all. And the professional liars at NASA tell us it's just an optical illusion. Excuse me, my sides are splitting. You know, one scientist from NASA actually said it's because the moon rotates from west to east. What? And another so-called scientist said that the moon rotates around the Earth twice as fast as the Earth spins. You know, who are they trying to fool here? And other explanations from NASA get even more ridiculous than that and make no sense whatsoever. And if their science is so accurate, why can they not even agree on which way the moon rotates around the Earth or how fast it's travelling? Something is very, very wrong. I don't know what it is, but something is very, very wrong. Could it be something other than the moon eclipsing the sun? I don't know. Anyway, the other major problem with the globe Earth model, amongst many by the way, is that the path of the total eclipse shadow that crossed North America in 2017, and all of the solar eclipses to be fair, was only 73 miles across. Now, how can a shadow be smaller than the object casting the shadow? It's physically impossible. We know from experience that shadows can be the same size or larger than the object casting the shadow, but they can never be smaller. We're told that the moon is 2,159 miles in diameter, so shouldn't the moon's shadow on Earth be at least 2,159 miles wide? But instead, we're told that the shadow of the US 2017 total eclipse was only 73 miles wide. We also know that the further away an object, the larger is its shadow. So how can the shadow of the moon be smaller than the moon when the moon is 2,159 miles wide and is allegedly 238,000 miles away? But according to NASA, again, the sun rays during a lunar eclipse only converge on the moon and create a laser effect. Are they making this up as they go along?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. However, at every other time, the sun's rays are always depicted as shining in direct, straight rays at Earth, which is necessary in order to account for the shadows that we see from the sunlight. NASA changes its story whenever it suits them in order to explain phenomena they cannot easily explain otherwise. And another huge problem with the paths of the solar eclipses on the globe model is that they make strange, wavy, zigzag patterns like that. That's the path of a solar eclipse on the globe, which makes no sense whatsoever. How can a zigzag pattern be possible? It means that the sun and moon are moving up and down together in unison. It just doesn't make sense. But strangely, or maybe not so strangely, if we observe the same path set out on a flat Earth map, then they are perfectly circular paths. Yeah. So the solar eclipse is a localized event, and these localized eclipses happen all the time. This is only possible with the local sun and moon, or whatever it is that's blocking the sun. This represents more proof that the Earth's flat and that the sun and moon are close and small. So, let's talk a little bit about a spinning Earth. Okay, we've talked a little bit about it, but let's examine that more closely. We have a total inability to detect or measure in any way the spinning of the Earth at the claimed 1,000 miles per hour that it's in an easterly direction. Flat earthers assert that vertically fired cannonballs and other projectiles should fall significantly due west, but they don't. they come straight down. So if you imagine a cannonball firing directly upwards, or any projectile, as it's up in the air, the Earth is moving at 1,000 miles an hour beneath it, so why doesn't it come down significantly west when it actually hits the ground? And the spin of the Earth should significantly change the flight times of eastern and western flights, but in reality there's little difference to the flight times apart from those caused by the prevailing wind, which is usually west to east, but not always. And so the answer to these questions from the perspective of the globe Earth conspiracy theorists, it's nice to turn that round every now and again, isn't it, is that as the Earth spins, gravity pulls the entire atmosphere and everything within the atmosphere, including cannonballs, butterflies, hot air balloons, helicopters, everything. So everything rotates at the same speed as the Earth. Because everything is then moving at the same 1,000 miles per hour, it gives the illusion that there's no movement. But it's truly an absolute mystery as to how gravity could cause the Earth and the atmosphere and everything in it to spin at up to 1,000 miles per hour and hold things so tightly in place, keeping all those trillions and trillions of tons of water that I mentioned before in the ocean firmly stuck to the Earth, yet still allow a butterfly to flap its tiny, fragile wings and go effortlessly in any direction it chooses. Okay. So, if the Earth were truly constantly spinning eastward at over 1,000 miles an hour, as I said before, vertically fired cannonballs and other projectiles should fall directly due west. Helicopters and hot air balloons should be able to simply hover over the surface of the Earth and wait for their destinations to come to them. Now, some of you, well, it's true though, isn't it?
I love that image.
Yeah. So during, remember a few years ago, the guy called Felix Baumgartner who did that huge free fall from the stratosphere. He spent 3 hours ascending over New Mexico, and he should have landed 2,500 miles west into the Pacific Ocean by the time he got down, but instead he just landed a few miles east of his takeoff point when he came down. And so, if the Earth's spinning eastward at 1,000 miles an hour, the average commercial airliner travelling at over 500 miles per hour would never be able to reach its eastward destination before it was overtaken by it from behind. And landing planes on fast-moving runways, which they are, you know, if the Earth's travelling at 1,000 miles an hour, landing planes on runways which face all manner of directions, north, south, east, west, and otherwise, will be practically impossible. Yet in reality, such concerns are totally negligible. Clouds, wind and weather patterns could not casually and unpredictably move in all directions, with clouds often travelling in opposing directions at varying altitudes simultaneously, which again is true. That's exactly what happens. And if the Earth and its atmosphere were truly constantly spinning eastwards together at over 1,000 miles per hour, this should somehow, somewhere, somehow be heard, seen, felt or measured by someone. And so far it never ever has been. Fact. If the Earth globe rotates on its axis at that incredible speed of 1,000 miles an hour, such an immense mass would of necessity cause a tremendous rush of wind in the space it occupied. The wind would travel all in one direction, and objects such as clouds would all have to travel in the same direction, which they painfully don't. NASA and modern astronomy decrees that the Earth is a giant ball, tilted slightly, wobbling and spinning at 1,000 miles per hour around its central axis, travelling at 66,600 miles per hour in circles around the Sun, and spiralling at 500,000 miles per hour around the galactic central point of the Milky Way, while the entire galaxy moves at a ridiculous, wait for it, 666 million miles per hour through the universe. This is what they tell us. And with all those motions originating from this alleged Big Bang explosion, which took place, they tell us, 14 billion years ago, That's a grand total of almost 700 million miles per hour in several different directions all at once that we're supposedly moving along at, and yet no one has ever seen, felt, heard, measured or proven a single one of those motions to exist, ever. Okay, this is not me saying it, this is absolute fact. No one has ever been able to measure it or prove it. And there are huge centuries-old sundials all over the world which still tell the time down to the minute, as accurately and as perfectly as the day they were created. If the Earth, Sun, Moon, planets and stars were all subjected to these claimed ridiculous, contradictory, revolving, rotating, wobbling and spiralling motions, according to modern astronomy, it would be impossible for these devices to tell the time so accurately without constant adjustment due to the aforementioned complex movements of all the heavenly bodies. Okay, so we're told that the Earth and its atmosphere spin together at such a perfect uniform velocity that no one in history has ever seen, heard, felt or measured it, this supposed 1,000 miles per hour movement. This is then often compared to travelling in a car at uniform velocity, where we only feel the movement during acceleration and deceleration, so they say. But in reality, even with our eyes closed tightly and with windows closed along a smooth road in a luxury car at a mere uniform 50 miles an hour, the movement absolutely can be felt. At 20 times that speed, Earth's imaginary 1,000 miles per hour spin would almost certainly be noticeable, and it would be felt, seen and heard by all. And people sensitive to motion sickness, of which there are many, fortunately I'm not one of them, feel distinct unease and physical discomfort from that motion, even motion as slight as in a lift or a train. So this means that the 1,000 miles per hour alleged uniform spin of the Earth has no effect on these people, but add an extra 50 miles an hour in a car travelling on the Earth's surface, and suddenly they feel distinctly sick. The idea that motion sickness is nowhere apparent to anyone at 1,000 miles an hour, but suddenly materialises at 1,050 miles an hour, is utterly ridiculous and indicates strongly that the Earth has no motion whatsoever. Now, the former Polish cosmonaut, a guy by the name of Mirosław Hermaszewski, stated the following at the end of an interview at a conference that where he was guest of honour. And the interviewer said to him, "You've been there. Is the Earth really a sphere hanging in outer space?" And Hermaszewski replied, "Oh, I didn't expect this question. The Earth's flat. I assure you it's flat." Now, Hermaszewski is not just any old cosmonaut. He's a national hero in Poland. He's a retired brigadier general who flew aboard the Soviet Soyuz 30 spacecraft, allegedly, in 1978, and is the only Pole who's ever flown in what is allegedly known as outer space. He was elected to the Mazovian Regional Assembly, which is a parliamentary body in Poland, and the President of Poland at the time awarded him the Commander's Cross of the Order of Polonia Restituta in 2003, and that's the highest honour that a Polish citizen can be bestowed with. And he's so popular in Poland that at a 2018 event he attracted a vast crowd that gathered to hear him speak and was totally swamped by autograph hunters. Now, some have alleged that Hermaszewski was using deadpan sarcasm, but it wasn't really deadpan. He did smile briefly. I've seen the video, which is not something one does usually when you're being deadpan. But his smile was not spontaneous, it was an insincere, contrived, nervous smile. He also anxiously looked around and he awkwardly took a pretend sip from what was clearly an empty cup. I'm sure we've all done something similar where it's kind of a distraction, isn't it? You just pick it up and do it. And he seemed very uncomfortable making the statement that the Earth is flat. He seemed not to think it was funny, as he became very solemn and morose as the interview drew to a close. There's no doubt that Hermaszewski has been living the utter lie of having gone into outer space, which probably does not exist in the form that we're told, and he may have viewed this as an opportunity to unburden his conscience. Or maybe it just slipped out. Who knows? But again, as an aside, It's not really to do with flat Earth, but I was just talking about it in the break to Pete and another lady. Has anyone ever seen that interview with Buzz Aldrin where he mentioned that they never went to the moon?
Yeah, with the little girl.
Yeah. Well, for those who haven't, let me just relate that. He was being interviewed by some school children, Buzz Aldrin. It's only a few years ago, not that long ago. And a little girl said to him, "Why is it that we've never been back to the moon after all this time?" And his answer was, I paraphrase slightly because I can't remember the exact words, but he said, "Well, that's not an 8-year-old's question." He said, "That's my question. I want to know why we've never been back." He said, "But I think I know the reason why we've never been back, and that is because we never went there in the first place." This is on video. This is not, this is not me making it up. Yeah. So yeah, that was just a little aside, but it just reminded me when I was reading that about this Polish guy.
Did he retract that at all? Sorry.
Apparently he was drunk.
Well, that's what they said.
That's yeah. But
He did
even
say.
then.
Sorry, Maureen.
Sorry, you will be.
But even if he was drunk, I mean, it's still, it doesn't mean to say you're going to make something up.
Like he seemed that was too deep his reaction to it.
See what you've started.
I know, yeah. Stop! Right, okay, right. I'm going to talk about something called the Bedford level experiment, which I don't know if some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not, but for the benefit of those who haven't, and the benefit of those who have, I will talk about the Bedford level experiments. Now these took place in East Anglia, in Norfolk, okay, on the Bedford River, on the Bedford level in the county of Norfolk, during the 19th and early 20th centuries, in an attempt to demonstrate that the Earth was a globe. Right? Now, at the point chosen for these experiments, the river was a slow flowing drainage canal running in an interrupted straight line for a 6-mile stretch to the northeast of the village of Welney, Norfolk. And the results of these experiments have always conclusively proved the flat Earth hypothesis. And although a few vested interests have claimed otherwise, these have been thoroughly disproved using real science, i.e. the objections that they raised. So the Bedford level experiments remain one of the most widely accepted proofs of the flat Earth hypothesis. Now the most famous of the observations, and they did it several times over a long period of years, involved a set of 3 poles fixed at equal height above water level along the 6-mile length of the water. As the surface of the water was understood to follow any hypothetical curvature of the Earth, the observation that the 3 poles aligned perfectly when observed through a theodolite serves as evidence of the flat Earth. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. I can get my page. So the first investigation was carried out by a guy called Samuel Rowbotham, who we had a quote from earlier. And he waded into the river and he used a telescope held 8 inches above the water level to watch a boat with a 5-foot mast and a sail row slowly away from him. He reported that the vessel remained constantly, in his view, for the full 6 miles all the way to Welney Bridge from his observational point, whereas had the water surface been curved with the accepted circumference of a spherical Earth, the top of the mast should have been some 11 feet below his line of sight, according to standard, universally accepted Earth curvature calculations. And in 1901, a gentleman by the name of Henry Oldham, who was a geography student at King's College, he set out to do the same thing, to prove the Earth was flat using the Bedford levels, and he absolutely reached the same conclusions as Rowbotham, and he obtained exactly the same results. And again, there was another experiment, did exactly the same thing, and this was by a lady who was called Lady Blount, so she was part of the aristocracy. And she hired a professional photographer who arrived at the Bedford level with his company's very latest state-of-the-art equipment, complete with phototelescopic lens. The apparatus was set up at one end of the clearly visible 6-mile length, while at the other end, Lady Blount hung a large white calico sheet over the Bedford Bridge, so that the bottom of it was close to the water. Now the photographer, lying down near Welney Bridge with his camera lens 2 feet above water level, observed by telescope the hanging of the sheet over the bridge and found that he could see the whole of it down to the very bottom. Now this surprised him, because until that point in time he'd been a fanatical orthodox globe believer, and the globe earth theory stated that over a distance of 6 miles the bottom of the sheet should have been more than 20 feet below his line of sight due to the curvature. His photograph showed not only the entire sheet, but also its reflection in the water below, and that was certified in his report, which concluded, and I quote, "I should not like to abandon the globular theory offhand, but as far as this particular test is concerned, I'm prepared to maintain that these 6 miles of water present a level surface." All of which sounds very much like a cop-out to me, but there you go. Okay, so now let's move on to something else called the Bishop Experiment and other examples of impossible viewpoints. Now, Monterey Bay in California is a relatively long bay that sits next to the Pacific Ocean, obviously. The distance between the two extremities of the bay is just over 23 miles. Okay, and on a very clear day, it's possible to see the beach at the far end from something called Lover's Point at the other end, and vice versa. Now, with a good telescope, lying down at the edge of the shore on the Lover's Point beach, 20 inches above sea level, it's possible to see people at the far end, at the water's edge on the adjacent beach, 23 miles away, near the lighthouse. The entire beach is visible down to the water splashing upon the shore. Upon looking into the telescope, it was possible to observe children running in and out of the water, splashing and playing, and people sunbathing on the shore. And it was also possible to see runners jogging along the water's edge with their dogs. From this vantage point, the entire beach is totally visible. This is what is known to flat earthers as the Bishop Experiment, as first constructed by Tom Bishop. Now, if the Earth is a globe, as they tell us, and 24,900 miles in circumference as claimed, then the surface of all standing water must have a certain degree of convexity. Makes sense, it's a globe, it's got a, you just take a portion of that globe, there's a degree of convexity. So every part must be an arc of a circle, to some extent. And from the summit of any such arc, there will exist a curvature, or declination, as I said before, of 8 inches over the first statute mile. Over 2 miles the fall will be 36 inches, and by the end of the 3rd mile, 72 inches, or 6 feet. So, correcting for the height of the observer of about 20 inches, when viewing the opposite beach over 23 miles away, there should be a bulge of water obscuring objects up to 300 feet above the far beach, but there isn't. Even accounting for refraction, the amount hidden should be around 260 feet, and seeing down to the shoreline should be impossible. That's just one example of this, and believe me, there are literally thousands, but I'm going to give you a few. Okay, the distance along the Irish Sea from Douglas Harbour on the Isle of Man southwards to the Great Orme in Land of Nod is 60 miles. Now, if the Earth were a globe, then the surface of the water between them would form a 60-mile arc, obviously, because it's a globe, allegedly. The centre would tower over a gap of 60 miles. The centre would tower 1,944 feet higher than the coastlines at either end. But it's well known by locals and easily verifiable. In fact, I've seen it myself, I've stood there and I've looked at it, that on a clear day, from a modest altitude of 100 feet, the Great Orme in North Wales is clearly visible from Douglas Harbour.
You see Scotland as well?
Yeah. And this would be completely impossible on a globe of approximately 25,000 miles in circumference. Assuming the 100-foot altitude causes the horizon to appear approximately 13 miles away, then the 47 miles remaining means that the Welsh coastline should still fall an impossible 1,472 feet below the line of sight. Okay. And on a clear day from the highland near Douglas Harbour, again on the Isle of Man, the whole length of the coast of North Wales is plainly visible to the naked eye. From the point of Ayr at the mouth of the River Dee, westwards towards Holyhead, that's 50 miles approximately. And this has also been repeatedly found to be perfectly horizontal using theodolites. If the Earth actually has a curvature of 8 inches per mile squared, as NASA and modern science and astronomer tells us, then the 50-mile length of the Welsh coast, seen along the horizon in Liverpool Bay, would have to decline from the centre point 416 feet on either side, but it plainly doesn't. So that's just another example. Moving on, the Philadelphia skyline is clearly visible from Apple Pie Hill in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, 40 miles away. If the Earth is really a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference, factoring in the 205-foot elevation of Apple Pie Hill, the Philadelphia skyline should remain well hidden below 335 feet of curvature. The New York City skyline is clearly visible from Bear Mountain, 60 miles away. And again, if Earth is a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference, viewing from Bear Mountain's 1,283-foot summit, the Pythagorean theorem determining distance to the horizon being 1.23 times the square root of the height in feet, sorry for all the maths, the New York skyline should be invisible behind 170 feet of curvature. And from Washington's Rock in New Jersey, at just a 400-foot elevation, it's possible on a clear day to see the skylines of both New York and Philadelphia in opposite directions at the same time, which is a distance of 120 miles. So if the Earth is a 25,000 mile ball, both of those skylines should be hidden behind more than 800 feet of curvature. And it's often, in fact there are plenty of photographs on the internet, it's often possible to see the Chicago skyline from sea level 60 miles away across Lake Michigan. And in 2015 a photographer by the name of Joshua Nowicki photographed this phenomenon. Several media outlets immediately jumped on it, and TV channels claimed this picture to be something called the superior mirage, which is an atmospheric anomaly caused by temperature inversion. Okay. While these anomalies certainly do occur, the skyline in question was facing right side up, whereas mirages tend to be not the right side up, and clearly seen, unlike a hazy mirage. And again, on a ball Earth 25,000 miles in circumference, it should have been 2,400 feet below the horizon. Okay, I'll just give you a few more examples of these, because some of these are even more incredible. From Genoa in Italy, at a height of just 70 feet above sea level, the island of Gorgona can often be seen, which is 81 miles away. 81 miles away. So if the Earth was a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference, Gorgona should be hidden beyond 3,332 feet of curvature. That's more than half a mile of curvature. And again from Genoa, at a height of just 70 feet above sea level, the island of Corsica can often be seen, and that is 99 miles away. So if the Earth's a ball, 25,000 miles in circumference, Corsica should fall 5,245 feet, almost an entire mile below the horizon it should be. And from Anchorage in Alaska, at an elevation of 102 feet, on clear days Mount Fouracre can be seen with the naked eye 120 miles away. So this should be leaning backwards away from the observer at the very least, as I mentioned before, and covered by 7,719 feet of curvature. In reality, the entire mountain can be seen quite easily, standing straight from base to summit. The Statue of Liberty in New York stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. If the Earth were really an oblate spheroid as claimed, that would make the statue an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon. So you get the idea. There are thousands upon thousands of examples. In fact, anywhere on Earth where you can see a long distance, you shouldn't be able to, basically. So these are just just example. I'll just give you one more, and this is from my own experience as a child. Okay, I was brought up in West Yorkshire in a place called Home Firth, which some of you may know as last the Summer Wine Village. And near my home there was a local landmark called Castle Hill. And on a crisp, clear day, it's possible to clearly see York Minster in York, which is 37 miles as the crow flies. Okay. At the time, of course, I didn't even consider the utter impossibility of it using the globe Earth model. And in my child's mind, I believed that the Earth was a globe, obviously, as all children do, because we get hammered with it at school, don't we, from being this big. And without questioning it at all, of course, as none of us do. I mean, I didn't even consider for a minute that, according to accepted science and using accepted formula, the globe Earth curves downward at 8 inches per mile, multiply the square root of the distance. But using that proven formula, then York Minster, from my vantage point, should have been obscured from my view by 912 feet of curvature. And all of the above is accepted science and not supposition or statistical juggling of any kind. This is using mainstream science. So how do we reconcile this with all the above examples? The obvious conclusion just has to be that we're being lied to, either about the globe Earth itself, or if not, then certainly about its diameter. But, of course, mainstream science always has an answer, or at least it always claims to have one. And another experiment that proved the Earth was in fact stationary was the Mickelson-Morley Experiment. G.J. Whitrow, a British mathematician, cosmologist and science historian, characterised the Mickelson-Morley experiment from a historical perspective, and he said, and I quote, "If such an experiment could have been performed in the 16th or 17th centuries when men were debating the rival merits of the Copernican and the Ptolemaic systems, the result would surely have been interpreted as conclusive evidence for the immobility of Earth, and therefore as a triumphant vindication of the Ptolemaic system, which is the Earth being the centre of the universe, and irrefutable falsification of the Copernican hypothesis. The Copernican hypothesis being that the Earth is a globe and is just a tiny part of the grand scheme of things." Mickelson and Molly, the two scientists, and more recently, other scientists repeated the same experiment many times. I won't go into all the technical details of the experiments, but Mickelson and Molly again were trying to prove that the Earth moved, and they utterly failed, and it actually converted them into believing that the Earth was stationary. And they tried it loads of different times and in many different horizontal axial positions and configurations at different times of the day, all with exactly the same result, that the Earth was stationary. Thus, the Earth was proven without question by them to be motionless. And that's the Mickelson-Morley experiment. Now, I want to talk a little bit about photographs of the Earth, courtesy of our wonderful friends at NASA. Now, two things spring immediately to mind. All these photographs that we see of the Earth in space. Firstly, who or what actually took these photographs? And from where? Some of them are certainly from too far out in space to be from satellites, which, by the way, don't exist in the way that we believe either, but again, that's another discussion for another time. Or the Hubble telescope, which some of them well predate, or indeed the International Space Station, again, which all of them predate. And secondly, why is it that in several, and again, I wish I'd got a PowerPoint presentation to show you this, but you'll have to take my word for it. I took two images and compared them, and in one image, North America, on this perfect circular globe that they claim is an oblate spheroid, in other words, pear-shaped, but this perfectly spherical Earth that they show. In one image of North America, the North American continent is about 1/3 of the size of the image on the right-hand side compared to the one on the left. So on one picture of the globe, North America is that big, and in the other one, it's that big. Just doesn't make any sense at all, and it just proves that they're lying to us. So, and if they're lying to us about all this, what else are they lying about? Well, the answer is almost everything as well now. Yeah. A quote here from a guy called Paul Michael Bales, which I thought was quite amusing and which I agree with. He said, and I quote, "The globe Earth doesn't exist, gravity doesn't exist, dinosaurs never existed, aliens do not exist, the Easter Bunny doesn't exist, the Tooth Fairy doesn't exist, Santa Claus doesn't exist, and neither do dragons. It would be really cool if they all did, but they don't." The conclusion...
How to ruin a childhood.
Yes. The conclusion, therefore, has to be, from all the information available, that many valid points have been raised which do not produce satisfactory explanations from the globe Earth supporters. Right, so we're nearly there now. Considering these and many other points raised by flat earthers, one has to seriously question the globe Earth model, which claims that the Earth has so many simultaneous motions in different directions that no one has ever been able to feel or detect, let alone measure or prove. Also, we have to marvel at the magical powers the globe Earthers ascribe to gravity, which makes everything possible in their fantasy universe. Now, whether or not, after this talk, you still believe that the Earth, whether or not you actually believe now that the Earth is flat, it's entirely up to you and your own belief system. I wouldn't be anyone to, even consider trying to talk you out of that. I'm still not 100% convinced of what it actually is quite yet, but I do believe it is definitely not a globe that is 25,000 miles in circumference. But I hope you agree with me that the information that I've presented today is quite compelling, and by the way, I've only, as you always can in these kind of events, only scratched the surface very briefly. There is so much more to know about it. And there's so much more that I just, it just would be impractical to put in here. So I've just tried to give you the basics. And finally, I'd like to wrap up by saying, why the lie? Why the big lie? And this is my summation of why the lie, because no globe equals no rotation, equals no orbit, equals no gravity, equals it's not heliocentric, therefore it's geocentric. So no Big Bang Theory, no Darwinism or evolution, no missing links. We're not random, we're unique, we're the centre of everything. We are intelligent design, which equals God or Creator, an awakening of mankind, the end of the New World Order. Is all that not reason enough? Any questions? The lady in blue.
Is there anything about the movie triangle thing? Is that linked to the flat?
Not that I'm aware of. What were you thinking of specifically?
No, it's just that it came into my head before I came. I thought, they must be talking about that.
No, sorry, I've not come across anything at all. Sorry.
Does this mean every other planet is flat?
What other planet?
Planets in the universe.
What other planets?
Saturn, Mars, Jupiter.
They're not planets. They're not. If you see photographs of all the stars, proper photographs. I don't mean NASA photographs. I mean proper photographs that are taken through cameras with very telescopic lens on them or telescopes. If you see pictures of stars, and they're all over the internet, it's just they're not solid globes. It's just plasma or something like that. You can see them. So there are no other planets.
They look like dancing geometric shapes. Even the colours. If anyone's familiar with sacred geometry, the stars when you really look at them, they're dancing around in these geometric shapes.
So in that case, what is astrology based on?
I have no idea. It's not something. It's not something. Astronomy. Well, astronomy is what I've just been talking about, isn't it? But I don't know what astrology is based on because I've not really researched it.
After you say there are no other planets.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Can I just ask a question? At the beginning of the presentation, we did a show of hands. Can I ask everyone who was Globe Earth prior to coming here today, who's changed their mind? Has anybody done that? Who's actually changed their mind today through this?
Well, you just think a whole lot of information that you didn't know.
What is it that's stopping the transition from that? Just out of curiosity for people to...
Well, I mean, I can answer that. I mean, I can only speak from early experience, of course, but you get so imbued with this globe Earth idea from being that big. Everywhere you look, TV, everything, you know, school especially, education, every classroom has a globe in it. You know, it's just, we're just bombarded with it. So it's cognitive dissonance. It's so hard to divest ourselves of that idea. Yeah.
Can I?
Sorry, could I just?
Yeah, I just want to do a Michael Caine thing. Did you know?
Did you know?
You know that the idea as well when you talk about the numbers about how the seasons are supposed to be explainable by the fact that the Earth goes round the sun and that it's tilted, and that's what causes the seasons. So it's not 90 degrees, they say it's 23.4.
And the opposite of that is 66.6.
Yeah, so a deviation of 23.4 from 90 is 66.6.
That old number again. Sorry.
Yeah, the measurements are like indisputable. Well, there need to be. I need to verify. I'd like to do those tests myself. But to be like devil's advocate, can I ask a couple of questions? Could it be that the reason the atmosphere and the birds and the butterflies don't all spin off is because it's that they're all like suspended in a magnetic field that is rotating to the Earth.
Why would a magnetic field hold something in place? Because they're not, butterflies are not magnetic.
But everything around them.
I know what you're saying, but again, I would answer it by saying what I said before, and that is if it can hold trillions of tons of water, buildings, huge structures in place, gravity, so they tell us, you can't get around the fact that it should be impossible for smoke to rise. You just can't get around it. It's nothing to do with magnetic fields at all, Chris. That doesn't make sense. Sorry to burst your bubble, but these things are not magnetic, so it can't be a magnetic field.
Chris, are you coming from that of the viewpoint of the torus fields? Because every object has a torus field.
Yeah.
Therefore, an electromagnetic field surrounds everything. I think is where you're coming from, which is
I mean, that sort of it's just my theory that the gravity is just like a lack of momentum, so that it's magnetism that is like spinning everything, and that has momentum, but where there's a lack of momentum, there's gravity.
Well, I mean, okay, you say that, but my answer to that would be, it's a bit of an oblique answer, but it would nevertheless be that even people like, you know, these expert scientists like Professor Brian Cox and his ilk, they freely admit that they do not know what gravity is and they cannot explain how it works. So,
it's an absence.
So if you've come up with an explanation, well done. Sorry.
So the other question was you were saying about the rays from the sun, right? And you're saying the angles.
They're called crepuscular rays, yeah.
But like my experience is that I've looked at these, like, you know, those fingers of God when you're on the ship and you see them come through the clouds and everything, and it looks as if the sun's just very close. But when I've thought about it more, it's in actual fact that those rays coming out, from my perspective, they're all pointing back to the sun.
Exactly. So, that's the point.
So wherever I am, they're always going to be coming out, like radiating from the sun.
Not true. Because if the sun is 93 million miles away, by the time those rays reach us, if you triangulate those rays, that absolutely, mathematically, mainstream mathematically speaking, you're able to triangulate those angles, and it gives you the distance from here, the Earth, to where the source of that light, and that is measurable.
But it centres at the sun. It's the centre point is the sun, where all of it's coming out.
I think what Chris is talking about, we were outside, and I told you this outside, and he's asking the same question. When you're looking directly at the sun, the will all radiate equally out, but that's not what John's talking about. He's talking about where it's reflecting down after it hits the atmosphere when it comes down.
It's pretty simple, Chris.
You're talking about when you look at it.
All you have to, it's simple mathematics, okay? You calculate the angle at which those rays hit the planet, and okay, not very, but this angle here gives you, it's simple Pythagorean mathematics. This angle here and the length of that distance from there to there gives you the length from there to there.
Okay.
Right? And that length from there to there is nothing like 93 million miles. Nothing like.
That's looking at a point where it's gone to, but not from my perspective.
Well, it doesn't matter about your perspective. Your perspective. No, I don't mean to be rude, but I mean, it's just simple maths. Really, it is simple maths.
No, I don't understand where the two endpoints. The origin is the sun, and then the rays are coming out from the sun everywhere. Like.
Do you mean where do you get your angle at the bottom?
Yeah. Well,
because you can clearly see where the rays come down and hit the horizon.
Oh, the horizon.
Yeah.
There's a horizon called the horizon.
Okay.
What is
Sorry, Maureen was first, sorry.
You've had that question enough, Chris. Right. Does the fact that we see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time promote the fact that it's a flat Earth?
Not specifically, I don't
Right.
think.
Why do we see the sun and the moon?
I don't know.
Because according to mainstream science, everything's rotating, right? So sometimes you'll see the sun and the moon in the same place, whereas sometimes it'll be opposite.
Oh, that's just been answered. They're always, it's always there. You just can't always see it.
Who's talking?
I can pretty much answer that. Dave Wise, if you go on his, he has an app that you can download, and he explains the whole model of how the sun and the moon rotate around the Earth in that particular manner, and why you see the moon one time, then you see the sun, and if you live on different other side of the Earth, you're only going to see it from that perspective, and so on. But he explains all that.
It's just, I wish I had a good recall, because I've only just this week read something, and it was explaining, it was telling you that at this time there you'll see because you often see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, but it said it's always there, it's just it's not always visible.
Well, check Dave Wise.
What's his name, David?
Dave Wise.
Wise.
There are lots of videos on
He's the only one
on the internet about how the sun-moon relationship works on a flat Earth. Lots.
And the seasons explain that, doesn't it?
Everything.
What was the question you asked John in the break, Rhonda?
Oh, I know, but it was just me being stupid.
No, the answer he gave,
right,
I think would be useful for everybody to know, wouldn't it?
Basically, because I hadn't envisaged it, I was thinking flat Earth, and if the Antarctic isn't just the Antarctic at the south, for whatever point you go to it from, but the Earth is flat and not a globe, I'm thinking, well, hang on, that means this wall of ice is going round everywhere. Yeah. So why are you always going south? But what he explained was, if you'd had the model to show, that's the Arctic and it's north, so anything in any direction is south.
But that's true of globe Earth as well.
And that's what Dave Wise explains on his app thing. He explains the whole thing. No matter where you go, the compass will always go.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking from some countries you'd get that Antarctic quicker than you should have, because it's not all the way down here.
Well, he explains, like John was saying about the air flight path. They don't go the shortest way, they go the longest way, because they don't want to fly over the Antarctic, because they don't want people to see.
Hang on, if you go to Arctic. Wow.
Sorry, somebody ask a question, I'm sorry.
I don't think you're allowed to fly across the Antarctic.
You're not, because there's something called the Antarctic Treaty. I'll just briefly tell a little story. Some of you may have heard of a guy called Admiral Richard Byrd, who was an American explorer in the 40s and 50s. Now, he claims that, I think it was the late 40s, that he actually flew, this was before the Antarctic Treaty, but he and his expedition team flew into the Antarctic, and beyond the ice wall, they found a huge other continent that wasn't covered in ice, it was green, and it was inhabited by a different race of people. This is an American admiral.
Extraterrestrial.
Yes, extraterrestrial. Now, what I was going on to say from that was that he came back and he was interviewed on TV in the mid-1950s, and it was a famous interview. Parts of it are still on the internet, which you can look up. And immediately after that interview was shown on TV, very shortly afterwards, they formulated the Antarctic Treaty. Now, the Antarctic Treaty forbids anyone from crossing into Antarctica, There are military planes constantly patrolling it. If any plane goes off course, either accidentally or deliberately, and tries to enter the Antarctic airspace, they are warned that if they go any further, they will be shot down.
Which company's military planes?
Probably United Nations, I would guess. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Maureen, but it's a good question. So yeah, the Antarctic
get funding for a plane, like. You're going to get funding for a plane, or
Raffle tickets are going up.
I was going to say,
raffle tickets are going up.
It's obviously a very contentious issue. There's only one way, in my view, to definitively find out without, you know, for us kind of normal people, without actually going up there and seeing it for itself, which they never allow us to do, of course, because that's all very carefully controlled and it costs a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. There's only one way to do it, and they won't even allow us to do this, is to sail down to the Antarctic, to the ice wall, paint a big red cross on the ice, or whatever, put a marker on there, and then sail following that ice wall. Now if the ice wall sends you that way around like that, then you know that it's a disk. If it sends you that way around like that, then you know that Antarctica's a small continent at the bottom of the Earth. That's the only way to find out. If you travel 15,000 miles, then you know Antarctica is a continent and the Earth is a globe. If you travel 60,000 miles around that way, then you know that the Earth is flat, but they won't allow you to do that anyway.
You have a question, Dawn?
Sorry, Dawn, go on.
There's no way it could be verified, but why could we not try to do like a remote viewing experiment?
That's what I was just going to say.
Well, good luck with that. I don't know how to do that.
The only problem with that is that you've got no way of verifying it for everyone else.
Yeah, that's a good
I think that's a good idea.
Sorry, this young lady here has had her hand up for a little while.
Why does it say there's no aliens when there's been lots of scientific?
Why does what say there's no aliens, sorry?
I think you said there was no aliens.
Yeah. I believe that.
Is
Well,
that
you explain, Dawn.
to UFOs and stuff?
Yeah, well, I believe that if there are, and I'm not convinced that there are, but I believe if there are UFOs and aliens, that they're not really aliens at all, that they're probably from this continent that Richard Byrd discovered.
So the different
It's all
beings
conjecture.
that are from our planet, humanoid.
There is no outer space, so there can't be any outer space aliens, in my view. You know.
Well, there's also the view of interdimensional, whereas they're phasing through realities as opposed from outside.
Yeah, that's possible.
You know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
John, there's a Belgian guy who's got this theory that there's a greater Earth and it's reflected in the moon.
I've seen that.
And that we're in a big crater, and the edge of the crater is like where the ice.
Yeah, I know, I've seen that stuff.
And one of the things he said was that he Von Braun was good friends with Disney, and at Disneyland there's like the way he's done the park is you can see some part of it, you can see the continents of the Earth, and you can see Epcot Centre, which is apparently a real alien place outside of the crater. And when they supposedly went to the moon or whatever, they went to outside of the crater.
Went to Disneyland.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that, and it's interesting. I mean, it sounds a bit far-fetched to me, but I wouldn't rule it out. I don't rule anything out, you know. But that would kind of fit in with what I said right at the beginning, is that I'm not necessarily.
You've taken yourself right there.
How the Geordie Bishop went to the Spanish City.
That will fit in with the fact that I'm not necessarily a flat earther as such, just a globe earth denier, and possibly that is correct what you're saying, and that's why I'm not 100% convinced of what the actual truth really is, but I just feel very, very strongly that it's not a globe at all.
So, what do you think they're doing with these trips that people are paying for to go up? Like Elon Musk is doing.
It's all a hoax. It's all a hoax. Musk is part of the elite.
Stop laughing.
I just thought we'd done a wish that went to Lachlan illumination.
What else are they lying to us about? You know, they lie to us about everything.
Could David Icke be right that we're living in hologram?
I could be. I mean, I wouldn't want to.
See, obvious answer to that. You know, still stuck on this plane, material existence.
When they say, you know, there's another continent beyond the Arctic, could that be where Shangri-La comes into it?
Probably, yeah, that's an interesting point actually, yeah.
No, just my dad's quite an unusual man, but what you have said about this other continent, he was talking about 60 years ago.
Yeah, I've heard this story about Shangri-La. Wasn't it supposed to be in the Himalayas or something though?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I don't know, but yeah, I mean, who knows? Anything's possible, except the globe Earth.
Did the Egyptians believe in the flat Earth?
Yeah.
They did, because they'll talk about the setting of the sun. It's the sun being set, because the god Set was supposed to travel across the earth until he got to the spot when the sun would set.
That's an interesting point you raised about the setting sun. Again, this is something I didn't cover in that talk, but actually when you see the sun set, it's not actually dipping below the horizon at all.
Right.
Okay. When you look at it through a telescope, a protected telescope, you can see that it's actually moving further away out of your vision, and it reaches the vanishing point of your eyes, because your eyes have a natural limit to them. So it's not actually dropping below the horizon. If you keep watching it through a telescope, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it becomes a tiny infinitesimal speck and then disappears, because it's gone past the vanishing point of your eyes. So it never drops below the horizon.
We're only seeing 0.05%, aren't we?
Of reality,
yes.
Yeah.
You've always done flat Earth. Have you ever thought of investigating the sun?
Well, not specifically, no.
That the sun actually isn't what we think it is.
Oh, I see. Well, it's just part of the same paradigm, really.
There's actually a planet beyond the sun.
A planet beyond the sun?
Yeah, it isn't what you see. You travel through. You actually travel through.
I've heard that you can actually see stars through the sun. I've never actually seen any evidence for it, but I've heard some people say that you can. Now you both be sent to the headmaster's office if you
have you ever read Mathematica Principia?
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, I've never read it, but I'm aware of it, yeah.
Has anyone got a copy?
I can't get that image out of my head now.
You used to get on a Kindle for free.
Did you?
Well, for a while, yeah. I don't know if it's still there. Kindle tells me everything about Amazon. They want to put it on the fire, don't they?
I'll have a second try then. There's a hard copy for sale.
I'm going to put you as two pigglers out there and shut it.
Well, I've got a question. That's, you know when
It's my question.
Oh.
What do you think about black holes?
Not much. I don't think about them at all. I just think it's another myth. It's just, what is a black hole? It's part of outer space, isn't it?
I think you think it's
Sorry, what?
As in you think it's just completely made up?
Yeah, I do.
Space doesn't exist.
The space doesn't exist. Not in the form that we're told, anyway. There is a limited amount of outer space.
No, it's got to stop this.
You better stop giggling. Right.
No, the harder you stop them.
Any questions?
Well, actually, I've got one. With the solar eclipse, well, you said that on the globe Earth.
Get in the kitchen. Chris, if you don't calm down.
I'll be okay. Once he's gone, I'll be okay.
He's going to be a good boy now.
Go on, mate, sorry.
Well, look, with the solar eclipse, what is causing that? What's causing the black hole?
I didn't hear a word you said, sorry.
I know, it's these naughty boys in the class. Well, the solar eclipse, right? So they say that it's mainstream, it's the Earth coming between the sun and the moon. So it blocks out the sun.
Yeah.
So if it's not a planet, then what is causing the blackout of the sun? If it's not the Earth, what? Do you not see where I'm coming from for that?
No.
Well, if you've
This is why we need
debunked what they're saying it is, what is it that's doing it?
Yeah, this is what I mean. There's got to be. If it's not the Earth that's coming between the two bodies.
No, I'm not debunked that it happens. I've debunked that they're that far away. Right. Well, I was talking about that 73-mile strip in the 27 eclipse. Right.
Do you see the moon, the sun's that far away? How can it be if it can be blocked out by something smaller? then itself.
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, what's blocking it then? I mean, something.
Is it that far away? Is it the size as it is?
It's best to describe it. Wait, this is why we need graphics, because then I could ask you, like, obviously Earth, Sun, Moon.
Yeah.
Right.
Shall I chuck him in?
No, it doesn't work.
But if it's a disc, right? Okay, so if it's a disc, and you've got the sun there and the moon there, then how?
Well, if the sun was there and the moon was there, it wouldn't be an eclipse.
No, but this is what I'm saying to you. But there is an eclipse.
What causes the eclipse? What is the actual physics
Well,
of it?
it's when the moon passes in front of the sun. I don't understand the question.
Because there's a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, right?
Yeah, well,
Right,
solar eclipses are when the moon obscures the sun.
Can I explain it?
Yeah, fire away.
Right. This is conceptualized.
What time is it?
We still think the universe is a physical substance. It's a physical apparition. Satan's job is to deceive the whole world. How does he do it? He uses the physical universe to create or use the change.
I agree that it is. I think it's a matrix, a holographic matrix. I do agree with that.
So if it's a matrix, then you can do anything.
So you're trying to,
which is perceptual, which is why I'm.
So you're trying
We're
to
living in the
explain
Truman Show.
matrix, you say you can't.
So all of these things are designed to hoodwink us into conceptualizing the physical reality when indeed it doesn't exist. And when we're trapped in the physical environment, the physical reality, our notion of substance of creation is taken away and removed. It's for the inquisitive mindset, the truth seekers, to see beyond that hallucinogenic apparition and realise that there's something beyond that, which is creation.
Well said.
Yeah, brilliant. I will call an end to questions, please. You've got me exhausted. Before we close, I would like to present John with a present, and I would also like John to explain something about his books. Do you mind if we do that? No. Because I think that would be interesting. John, the present I have for you is I picked this, and Dave made this, right? So that's not made, but Dave did paint it, and Dave did mounted it on wood. Now, it's very special because it's got our favourite drink on, John, hasn't it? Yeah. Gin and tonic. So you'll never forget Truth Seekers, will you? So that's for you.
Thank you so much. How did you know it was my own birthday?
It's not. Yes, it's mine as well.
Anybody else got an own birthday today?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
So it's everyone's birthday then?
Everyone's got an own birthday.
So I take it that a lot of the stuff you talked about yesterday, Diana.
Yeah, Diana and Jack the Ripper are all in here.
Are in here.
Much more than I actually told you about, you know, because even though Diana went on forever, I'm sorry about that. There's much more of a complete story in here.
Is the JF Kennedy in here as well or not?
No, JF Kennedy is
a separate book.
Right, this one was my first ever book, and that was written in between 2009 and 2011. It was published in early 2012. That was my very first book.
Is that the second edition?
And how many years did it take you to write?
3.
Is that the second edition, is it?
No, there is no second edition. I've been too busy writing first editions of other books to do second edition.
So John's written about 7 books altogether, haven't you?
Yeah.
7.
My second book was about the Titanic, RMS Olympic, which again, I don't have copies with me. But
can I borrow your copy?
It's the truth about the Titanic story.
Where's John's book?
I'm not sure if I've covered that here.
We've got them here. We've got the books here. So your second one was the Olympic?
RMS Olympic, yeah. I'll actually, if we've got time, I'll just tell a very brief story about how that came about. I mean, I'd always been in that one. That's my second book. This was published in 2013. This is the true story of the Titanic, and not the ridiculous myth that we all hear. And how that came about was, I'd been out one day, and I came back. There was a message on my answering machine. No, sorry, there wasn't a message first time. I just noticed that there'd been a call from a number that I didn't recognise at all. I thought, that's a strange looking number, so I just ignored it. And then I got an email from someone who said, I'm trying to get through to John Hamer. I'm a Hollywood film director, and I'd really like to make a film of your story about the Titanic, because before I'd written that book, I'd actually done a PowerPoint presentation several times, one of which appears on YouTube, about the true Titanic story, and this person had allegedly seen this and wanted to contact me, but I didn't believe it, so I just ignored it. I just ignored the email, I deleted it. I just thought it's some crank, because you know, obviously in my position you do get a lot of people just winding you up, you know, wind-up merchants. And so I just thought, rubbish. And then I didn't connect it to the phone call. Then I got another phone call a little bit later, and somebody left a message with an American accent saying the same thing from the same number. And again I ignored it. And next time the phone rang, again a couple of weeks later, I actually answered it. And it was this American lady who said, I'm a Hollywood film director, I'd really love to make a film of your version of the Titanic story if we can get funding. She said, would you like to come over and stay with me for a few weeks? She said, I know a lot of film producers, we can go around them, spend some time talking to them, seeing, you know, if we can get any funding to do it. So of course I said, nah. No, I didn't. I said yes, that'd be fantastic. So I went over to Hollywood, stayed with her ranch in the Hollywood Hills, absolutely beautiful place it was. For almost 3 weeks. We spent 2 of those weeks going around all the producers that she knew. Her office was next door to George Clooney's. We saw him in the corridor, but we didn't get to speak to him. But obviously she knew him, so just doing a bit of name dropping here. And anyway, the sad upshot of it all was that we spent all this time doing it. I had a great time, I had a whale of a time while I was there. But we never got any funding, apart from one guy who said, I'm interested, he said. But he said, where's the book? I said, what do you mean, where's the book? He said, got to be a book. He said, I can't make a film unless it's based on a book. So I said, I haven't got one. He said, well, can you write one? I said, oh, yeah, I suppose so. So I came back home and I wrote that in 6 weeks flat.
Wow.
Right? And I sent him the manuscript for it, and he got back to me and he said, no, he said, that's not what I meant at all. He said, it has to be a novel.
Oh, okay.
So then I wrote this, which is the novel based on that. It took me considerably longer than 6 weeks because I'd never written a novel before, and I never intend to write one ever again. But nevertheless, that's what I did. And so I sent him the manuscript for that, and he got back to me fairly quickly, and he said, oh no, he said, I've changed my mind. He said, I'm not interested anymore. And thanks very much. I thought, great. But anyway, I got 2 books out of it. So that was that story. And then my next book was this. It's in 2 volumes. It's called Behind the Curtain, and it says it is a chilling expose of the banking industry, which I've been trying to get changed from Amazon for a long time now, because it doesn't really do that strapline, a chilling expose of the banking industry, doesn't really do it justice at all. And as a result of that, sales have been fairly low. I think a lot of people look at that and think, how dull, I can't know what they're reading about the banking industry. But what it is, this is actually an expansion on that. Okay, it goes into far more detail than this does, but it covers different topics as well, or topics that are not in there. But this is my favourite book of every one that I've written. Out of all the 7 books that I've written and the 8th one in the pipeline, this is my absolute favourite because there is some absolutely stunning information.
And they're a bargain price, aren't they? Because you get 1 book is £20, but 2 books £30.
Yeah.
Bargain.
Okay,
Yeah.
sold.
So yeah, that was the story of Behind the Curtain. Really, what it's about, it is about the banking industry. It starts off about how money is a sleight of hand created out of thin air, as most of us probably know. But then, that's just the beginning. What it really needs to say is that the book is about how that phenomenon of them being able to create money out of thin air, out of nothing, has given them the funding to do everything else that they do. Okay, so it's about everything that's gone on in the last few centuries, specifically focusing on a lot of different incidents to what's in here. But it just really goes into massive detail about lots and lots of different things. The JFK story is in there as well, but not the same story. This was my next book, JFK, A Very British Coup, which comes at it from an angle that I've never seen covered before, and that is that it was the British Crown Temple that financed and ordered the execution of JFK. But there is other stuff in there about JFK which is very interesting. But yeah, that is a totally different take on the JFK story. Obviously some of the stuff's the same, because obviously basic information is basic information, but it does cover a lot of stuff that you'd probably be gobsmacked at as well. And then, again, I've got a copy of
Falsification of Science.
The Falsification of Science, which is kind of a sister volume to that, was my last book. That was published in February this year. And that Flat Earth is in that, the stuff we've just been hearing about this afternoon. Lots and lots of other topics, you know, the nuclear weapons hoax, you know, lots and lots of different you know, aspects.
And that's
of how
again for the bargain price of 2 for 30.
Yeah, if you buy history and science together, it's £30 for the two, rather than £20 each.
So what are you working on now?
I'm working on a book called Welcome to the Masquerade. No prizes for guessing.
Oh, I remember you mentioned that.
That should be out. I was hoping to get it out for Christmas, but I've got no chance. It's probably going to be January, February by the time it comes out.
And we'll have you back to talk about that then.
Thank you.
With presentations.
So, yeah. And then I've even got another one in the pipeline. Well, it's up here. It's not actually even partially written yet, but I've got another one in the pipeline which is going to be about where they're going to take us, assuming that they win the battle that we're going through now. But I don't think they will, so it's kind of hypothetical.
Are you going to do Disney and the space program or not?
That's in Falsification of Science. Oh, in massive detail, massive detail.
You got that one, didn't you, Bill? Did you get the falsifications?
Yeah. So yeah, that's the story of my book. Thank you for that.
So before we do the raffle, we're going to have Dave up for another song. Yes, we're going to have Dave up for another song.
Right,
and this is
step down from the podium.
Step down, let Dave have. Oh. Have you got?
So thanks everyone for listening.
Is there a rule one?
Thank you.
Is it the road song?
It's not. Yeah, of course we want the rude one. Do we want the rude one, people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we want a few rude ones, I think.
Yeah. It's based on this current scam.
So it is a strip, is it? Alright.
It's based on the current scam, and basically it's about, if you've had the jab, it's about, well, could you, this shedding issue. So basically, do you want to have a relationship with somebody who's had 2 jabs? So it's called 2 jabs, no shag. Take it away, Dave.
I'm not going to...
I'd rather have 2 shags than no jab, to be
That's his next song, isn't it? 2 shags, no jab. Which one is it, this one?
It's called No More Shag. I'll not play the graphic version of it.
Oh, go on, Dave.
No,
Got a grown-up audience.
There's no children here. Well, I don't know. He'll not listen. You close your ears.
What's the full version? Yay!
Do you have to leave the room now, do we?
Yes.
Shh.
One jab, 2 jab, no more shag, no more humping, it's too bad. 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, keep that seed inside your bag. 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, no more fucking like a stag. 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, no more cock, no more gag.
Well, you asked for it.
1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, it's no wonder I'm so sad. 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, no more fucking, no more brag. No 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, no more worry, no more brag. 1 jab, 2 jab, no more shag, all that's left is hashtag shag.
Well done, Dave. Well done. I wouldn't give you a t-shirt, but you don't deserve that.